singing holy is your name. And if it lifts you higher, put in me your desire, a passion worthy of your name. On the sound forever, heart and heaven together, singing holy is your name. And if it lifts you higher, put in me your desire, a passion worthy of your name. And I throw my weakness into your greatness. This broken heart is all you want. Singing holy, heart like heaven, singing holy, God Almighty, on this earth goes out, singing holy is your name. Singing holy, heart like heaven, singing holy, God Almighty, on this earth goes out, singing holy is your name. Singing holy is your
All right, did everyone get a cheesecake bite? I grabbed one. Those things are good. We want to say hi to those joining us online as everyone else comes in and finds a seat. Man, we're so glad we have the ability to stream our services live and to be able to archive all of our old services. So if you miss a Sunday, man, we encourage you, go back on our YouTube page. We've got all of our old services archived there. And if you're traveling or out of town or whatever, man, you can join us that way. And we're so grateful for the technology to be able to do that. But there's something special about being in the place, right? There's something special about worshiping together. There's something special about praying together. And I believe that God designed it that way, and that we live too much on our own little islands in the modern world. We're so isolated all the time. And so I want to encourage you, if you are watching online, man, come on out. We're going to be in a brand new building in 2 weeks. And so if you haven't heard, we are moving. And so if you show up to this place in May, you might find a different church here, but you won't find us here. We are, our first official Sunday in the new place will be May 5th, and we're so excited. There's a lot of moving pieces. We're kind of in the crunch time of getting it all put together, and I know a lot of you are interested in helping us in that time and helping us on that move. And man, if you haven't communicated with us already, let us know, let my wife know. That way we can contact you directly and let you know exactly when we're going to be in there and what the game plan is. There's a few details that are still a little bit up in the air just because the old tenants are moving out and we're a little bit on their timeline. But everything is in motion. The plan is to have a walkthrough with the property owner on May 1st. That's a Wednesday. Once we get all of the approvals and all the okays to start doing stuff, we plan on hitting the ground running that week. So if we can't do anything on Wednesday, which our goal is to start hit the ground running on Wednesday. But if we're not able to get in there Wednesday afternoon, then we'll be starting first thing Thursday morning of getting stuff rolling and set up. And we will have church in there that very first Sunday that we're able to. And it's not going to be put together perfectly the way that we want it, but it's going to be better than meeting in the school. And we're going to slowly put it together over the course of the summer and into the fall. And then our plan is this fall to do a grand launch, grand opening, where we invite every human that we know to come and be a part of it. And so if you like more details about our move and about the why and what and how, I'd love to have a conversation with you after church and give you a little bit more details about that. Another quick announcement, something right around the corner. This Saturday, I'm going to say this Saturday, we have a serve day. Michael, what's a serve day? Serve day is when we, as a body, go out and give back to our community. And so we haven't done one in a little bit, especially with the colder weather. But as we kind of roll into this new season of the church, our opportunities to serve, specifically to serve our community, are going to ramp up. And so our first one is going to be this Saturday. We'll be meeting at the White Rock Trailhead. If you don't know where the White Rock Trailhead is, ask Chris. He'll give you the information. But basically, if you drive out towards Thumb Butte, you go past Thumb Butte. How far? 1 mile. You go 1 mile past Thumb Butte. There's a trailhead on the right-hand side of the road. We'll have our discovery flags out there in the road so that you can find us easily. And we'll be partnering with the Forest Service. They'll take us back to the trail. There's hikers, there's bikers. It's an active trail. And we go and we do trail maintenance. And so we'll be building the path and cleaning the rocks and cutting back branches and really maintaining that specifically with the bikers in mind so that they don't come around a corner, nail a rock, and flip over their handlebars. And so it's true, that'd be bad. And the reason that we do this is because there's a couple reasons that we do this. And I am going to be preaching a little bit on this today. But we believe in getting outside of the walls of the building. We believe in being a community that is outwardly focused. We believe, last week we talked about service and we talked about serving one another within the body, and that we should learn how to serve one another within the body because that's how the church was designed to operate. And that literally, if you look in the early church in the book of Acts, that no one needed anything because they took care of everything, right? And so last week we talked about serving within the body, but we also believe that we serve within the body so that we have the ability to serve outside the body. And so going forward, and if you've been around, there's been other opportunities. Serve days are something that we intend on putting on our calendar more often. And it's a simple way for us to show the love of Jesus out in our community. And so why hikers and bikers and trails? Well, because that's a huge demographic of our community. If you're familiar with Central Arizona and Northern Arizona, one of the biggest draws to being in the Prescott area is the hiking is incredible. The biking is incredible. The weather is beautiful, and people like to get outdoors. And we as a church believe in getting outdoors. In fact, as the weather continues to get nice, you'll see us transitioning and having more outdoor activities. We'll do church out at the lake. In fact, we've got our Stars Camp Out weekend coming up in June. It's a 3-day camp out up on the top of Mingus. And it's just an opportunity to do different things with the intent of reaching different people, with the intent of making connections. While we're out on the trail, There are bikers and hikers every time that we're out there that walk past us or ride our bikes past where we're working on the section of trail. And they stop and they say, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for being out there. And if we're lucky, we can strike up a conversation. Why are you doing this? Why are you out here? Oh, we're just out here because we love you. We're out here because we want to provide something to you. We're out here because we just want to show the love of Jesus. And I believe, and this is what we're preaching on this morning, is that we can show the love of Jesus through acts of service all the time. Everywhere, all day, every day. And so this Saturday is an opportunity for us to do this collectively together, but you don't have to wait for the church to organize something for you to do it. Quick little detail before I jump in. Oh, yeah, good thoughts. A couple quick details on it, and then we're going to jump into the message because I tied it all together because I'm sneaky like that, but it's not sneaky at all. But Jim, you don't have to laugh that hard. So we'll be meeting at 8 a.m. We'll be meeting at 8 a.m. We'll be done working by noon. We encourage you, bring a water bottle, bring some snacks. You are required by the city to wear closed-toed shoes, long pants, and long shirt because we will be out there working and they don't want you to get cut up. We will provide gloves, we will provide tools, and we will provide hard hats. If you have kids who would like to come and participate, they are more than welcome to come, as long as you trust them with giant loppers scissors. So if you trust your kids, we would love to have them. We actually have waivers in the back of the room for anyone who's under 18. If you're a minor, you have to have parental waiver signed to come. But just so you know, I will be out there with my 7- and 8-year-old. And my boys look forward to coming and being a part of this. And they get out there with the loppers and they're cutting back branches and they like to see who can throw them the furthest off the trail. And then they run out of steam, they get tired of working, and then they just go and explore up in the trees. And that's fine too. But it's a great opportunity for the kids to be out there with their parents, with their friends, and just be outside, enjoying God's nature, giving back, learning the value of serving, learning the value of work, and it's going to be a great time. If you have any other questions about the details of Saturday, talk to Chris. Chris, wave at everyone in the back of the room. He'd be happy to give you the details on that. But man, we encourage you, if you're able-bodied, if you can handle a little bit of a hike and a little bit of a work, man, come on out Saturday. It's actually a lot of fun, and it's a great opportunity for us to just give back to our community. And like I said, we're going to have some other serve days coming up in the near future. They're not all going to be physically work-related. Some of it will be different. We're working on some ideas of doing some clothing stuff and maybe some other things that I won't bore you with the details that I don't have yet because we haven't put them together. But we're gonna jump into today's message today. Again, if you want any more information about that, talk to Chris. Man, how many glad you came to church today? I'm so glad that you're here. If you haven't got a chance to meet me, I probably should have said this about 25 minutes ago. My name's Michael. If we haven't got a chance to meet, I have the privilege of leading this church and being the pastor here. And man, we've just been in this exciting season of God, where are you taking us? What do you want us to do? And the theme word of my life over the last 2 years has been obedience. And this idea of quiet my mind, quiet my soul, quiet my life. How many could use a little life quieting, right? Slow down. Say, God, what are you trying to tell me? Where do you want me to go? What are we trying to accomplish? And I believe that as I've tried to be intentional in slowing down and hearing the voice of God, that He's laid out a path for us to go as a church. And as we continue to be obedient in that, man, I just can't help but believe that God's going to blow our minds with the people that come in off the street, for the opportunities that we're going to have to minister to people. And ultimately, the dirty little secret at the bottom of everything that we do is we want to share the gospel message with everyone that we have an opportunity to. And so why do we go do these things? Why do we do camping trips? Why are we going to go and take everyone out to do the surf? Why are we going to plan different activities and go to the lake and all that kind of stuff? Is so that we have an opportunity to broaden our audience. So we go to them with the intent of just sharing the love and the gospel message with them. And so that's not what we're preaching about today. Will you pray with me? Father God, I pray you give me focus, you give me clarity, that the message that you have prepared in my heart this morning comes out clearly, and that it makes a whole lot of sense. I pray that it motivates us to do the things that you've called us to do. Pray in Jesus' name, amen. Amen. If you missed last week, we're jumping in. This is part 2 of a series that I've titled G.O.A.T, which is just an acronym for greatest of all time. And if you are at all a sports fan, which I am, you've heard this term GOAT, and there's tons of debate around this idea of who's the GOAT, who's the greatest of all time. We have generational gaps of Michael Jordan's the greatest, no, LeBron James is the greatest. I see you, Nacho, it's okay. He's a LeBron guy. I might have just made that up, I don't know. But we talk about Brady versus Belichick. We talk about, the all-time greats. And it's an interesting conversation that happens within this. We can all relate to it, or if you're a sports fan, you can relate to it in this context. But if we're honest, this conversation about greatness creeps into every part of our world. It creeps into, I want to be the best at my job, or I want to be the most financially stable, or I want to get the best grades, or I want to have the best reputation. And this idea of greatness creeps into all areas of our lives. I said last week that I've never met a person, ever met a person that was just like, yeah, I want to be mediocre. Like, I'd like to be the most okayest person. No, there's something ingrained deep within us that strives for something more, that strives for something great, that strives to leave a legacy, that strives to leave something of value. And I believe that God actually put that in there for us. And so last week, we shared a story about Jesus and his disciples, and they were congregating, and this was them thinking that Jesus was getting ready to overthrow the government, and that he was going to be sitting literally, physically as the king over Jerusalem. He was going to throw over the empire and kick out Herod, the king, and he was going to take over. And so the disciples are having this discussion of like, yo, Jesus, when you become king, who's going to be sitting at your right and who's going to be sitting at your left? In a modern context, it would be, Jesus, when you're president, who's your VP? Who's in your cabinet? Who's your Secretary of State? Who's going to be sitting in these positions of prominence? And Jesus brings them all together, and he says this: you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. This is where your mind's going. You're thinking you're going to be able to rule your authority over them. As their high officials exercise authority over them, not so with you. He says you're going to be different. He said, instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be the slave to all. And Jesus, what he does is he does this little juke. We used to call him Jesus jukes, where you have this idea, and then Jesus just comes in and he's like, nope. And he flips it upside down. He says, actually, if you want to be great, you need to learn how to be a servant. You need to learn how to be he literally uses the word slave to all people. And we talked last week about that word slave, and if you missed it, I would encourage you to go back. But today, I want to talk about this idea of achieving greatness in the terms of how Jesus would classify greatness. So within the context of being a slave or being a servant or putting out others ahead of ourselves, and really take a look at how that really operates and how Jesus put that together. This was a common teaching that Jesus gave throughout his entire ministry. It often didn't come out in the words of servanthood. It often came out in the words of love. And we're going to discuss today how we love by serving. And so the most famous commandment that Jesus ever gave, that if you've been in church for any amount of time, you'll recognize as what Jesus put the emphasis on. You can find this in all the Gospels. This morning we're going to be looking at it in the Gospel of Matthew. And Jesus is in the middle of a teaching. He's giving instructions to the crowds and to his disciples. This is in the middle of his ministry. And there's this group of super churchy people. We know them today as the Pharisees. We know them today as the Sadducees. That's just a fancy way of saying the super ultra religious people. And in fact, I would venture to guess that if we were to put ourselves into their time, a lot of us probably would be Pharisees and Sadducees. We make it out like it's a dirty word, and we make it out like the Pharisees were the bad guys. But in all honesty, if you really look at it, the Pharisees were just the church people. They were the people that were dedicated to the teachings of the Old Testament. And so they were threatened by what Jesus was doing because Jesus was changing the rules on them a little bit. And so they were trying to catch him in a trap. And so we pick up in Matthew chapter 22. I'll be reading from starting in verse 34. If you'd like to follow along, we'll have the verses up on the screen. This morning, I'm in the NIV translation. So if you have a different translation, your words might be different. If you don't have a Bible, we've got free Bibles in the back of the room. We'd love for you to have those. Matthew 22, verse 34 says this. It says, hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them was an expert in the law, and he tested Jesus with this question. It says, Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and all of the prophets hang on these two commandments. And so they're setting him up, and Jesus' answer to the question, what is the greatest commandment? You may have heard it simplified and put this way before, but I think it's such a beautiful way to put it. Jesus' response is, hey, you need to love God and you need to love people, right? And then he goes on to say that all of the law of the Old Testament will be fulfilled if you do these two things. And I actually did a little research this week, and I was looking for the idea of the law being fulfilled in love. And this is a theme all throughout the Old Testament, or all throughout the New Testament. You find it in Paul's writings. You find it in Peter's writings. You find it in Jesus' teaching. This idea that if you love God and you love your neighbor, that you will fulfill all of the commandments of the Old Testament. And so I put it to the test. If you think of a law, the speed limit. This speed limit obviously was not an Old Testament law. But but it is a modern law, and it's put in place for our safety. Well, if you love God, you're going to be obedient to the authorities that he put into place. And if you love people, you're going to care enough to not put them in danger. And so by doing that, you're going to fulfill the law of the limit. Does that make sense? And so I remember when I was a kid, we did this experiment. I was probably about 12, 13 years old. And we were doing this exercise of like, okay, any rule that you can think of can be fulfilled by loving God and loving your neighbor. And someone said, what about running with scissors? It's like, okay, let's put it to the test, right? If you love your neighbor, you won't run with scissors. Why? Because if you're running with scissors, you might trip and you might stab somebody, and that's very loving. Okay, it's silly, I understand. But as Jesus gave this teaching, literally what he was saying is that if you do these two things, you're not going to have to get caught up in the details of the other teachings. You're not going to have to worry and stress about what that Old Testament regulation was, because living your life this way is going to cover all of the bases. And so famously, one of the people who were there was looking for a loophole and say, okay, Jesus, but who is my neighbor? And if you're at all familiar with the story, that's when Jesus gave the story of the Good Samaritan. We're not going to go into the details of the Good Samaritan this morning. If you're unfamiliar with it, I encourage you to look it up and read it this week. But I feel like most of us are probably familiar with this story, that the phrase Good Samaritan has endured all the way to modern times. It's something that we still utilize today in modern vernacular, is talking about being a good Samaritan. And basically, the idea of the story is that the person that you would least expect is the one who stood up and took care of the need. And so when Jesus was asked, who is my neighbor? His response is, everybody is your neighbor. That's really what we're getting at here, is we are called to love all people. All people. The Bible's very clear about loving all people. But what about those people? Right? You know who those people are. They're the Democrats. What about the Republicans? I can't love the other political party. Yeah, them too. But they're the enemy. No, they're not. They're people. We got one enemy. His name is the devil. Everyone else is a person that God made and loved. But let's hypothetically say that they are the enemy for the sake of conversation. I don't believe that they are. But Jesus said, even the enemy. He says it in Matthew chapter 5. This is during his Sermon on the Mount. He says, you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be his children and your Father in heaven, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good. He sends his rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing this? That was like, if you understand what Jesus is saying here, he's like, not even the tax collectors. That would be the equivalent of like, not even the thugs, not even the cartel do that. Not even the drug runners do that. The statement he's making is an extreme statement. He's saying, if you only love the people who love you, you're not doing anything different than what even the evil people do. You're just doing the same thing that everybody else does. He says, what reward is there in that? Which I guess would imply that there's a reward that comes in doing it the other way. I suppose it would imply if there's no reward in hating your enemy, that maybe God has a reward for loving your enemy. And so he says, this is going to be, if we do this, and if we do this well, and if we do this the way that God has called us to do this, that it's going to look different than what the rest of the world does. It's not going to make sense to the rest of the world, that you're going to be looked at and be talked about like, what in the world is going on over there? Jesus is saying, I've called you to be different. So where is this connection? Because it's very clear, very, very clear, and very, very well established that Jesus' ultimate command to us was to love the world, for us to love people, for us to love our neighbor, for us to love our enemy, for us to love, 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 love. So where does this connection and where does this connection between love and service come in? I was going to go on a bunny trail. I decided not to. You should be proud of me. Where do we get this connection between love and service? And how do we get this idea that loving people really is serving people? We see this in Galatians. This is in Paul's letter to the Galatian church. And he says this. He says, my brothers and sisters, you were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge in the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly. For the entire law, again, this is what we were talking about, the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command. Love your neighbor as yourself. And see, Paul is making this connection. He's saying, you will love your neighbor as yourself when you serve one another humbly in love. When you serve one another humbly in love. See, our love really is shown in our service to one another. And Jesus demonstrates this, and this is really where we're going to get into the heart of what we're going to be talking about today. That Jesus shows the connection between love and service. And Paul talks about it a little bit. And I could pepper you with passages throughout the New Testament of where this connection is made, but I think that it's actually most beautifully demonstrated by Jesus himself when he washed his disciples' feet. And so, if you're unfamiliar with the story of Jesus washing his disciples' feet, man, it's an amazing illustration. It can be found in John chapter 13. We'll be reading parts of it today, but I want to give you a little bit of historical context before we read it this morning, because I think it really does illuminate the story, and I think it really shows this acts of service put into action in a really beautiful way. If you're familiar with the timeline of Jesus' ministry, this happens after his entry into Jerusalem. So this is during what we sometimes refer to as Passion Week. It's the week in between Jesus' arrival into Jerusalem and his crucifixion on the cross. And so there's a lot of things going on here. This is when the Last Supper is getting ready to be taken place. The story tells us that in the context of Jesus washing feet, that Judas had already made the deal. Judas had already gone and found the Roman officials. He had already received his payment, and he was getting ready to turn Jesus in. And so this is all right around this time of like, things are about to get real. And you come in and you see the scene of a feast that's getting ready to take place. And when you read stories like the Last Supper, and you see these meals described, what you'll see is language that they were reclining at the table, right? That they were sitting back. You have to keep in mind that they weren't sitting in a lazy boy, right? Reclining at the table did not equate to big comfy chair with your feet kicked up. But the tables that they sat on were low seating tables. And they had pillows that they would line the tables with around, on the ground around the table. And when they sat at the meal, they would literally be resting on their side on the table. And so then you get these pictures of sometimes it talks about Jesus embracing and reclining with the disciple who he loved, with John reclining on Jesus. They would have literally been laying close to each other, and it would have been like this camaraderie of buddy of we're close and we're embracing. And so they would have been seated this way around the table. Another detail is they didn't have cars. And last I read the Bible, there was only one donkey coming into Jerusalem, and Jesus was the one riding it, right? They wore sandals, and I don't know if you've ever been to Israel, but there's a lot of dirt, right? And so this idea of they were traveling, they would have been walking long distances, and then when it was time for the meal, they would be seated around these small tables, trying to lay comfortably. Well, where do your feet end up when you're laying all around each other? So the feet were nasty, and they were all up in each other's faces. I would assume they tried to keep their feet away from each other, but when you're around a table like that, and so the value of clean feet was something that was of great honor. And the washing of the feet was something of great dishonor. It was the position of a very lowly person, because the feet would have been, bro, you think you've seen dirty. The feet would have been nasty. And they're getting ready to eat a meal. And so the idea of scrub, and I mean, I don't want to get too graphic, but like in between the toes, like the junk in the toenails, is that too, should I stop? Okay, my mom's shaking her head, that's enough. You get the picture of what, and they didn't have little scrub brush toothbrushes, they didn't, you get it. Okay, I'll stop. You get it. The feet were gross. So the evening meal was in progress. John chapter 13. And the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. So the most prominent dinner guest, who knows he's on his last thing on earth, getting ready for the things that are about to come, is at your house, and you've already set the table, and the meal has already started, and he gets up from the table, and he puts on an apron. And he puts the apron on, and he ties it around his waist. And naturally, the dinner guests go, "What are you doing? Jesus, you don't wear the apron. You don't put the towel around your waist." And then Jesus isn't going to just mop up the dishes. He's not going to just tidy up the stove. he's going to deep clean the bathroom. And he's getting in the crevices that get overlooked. And he's getting into the places that haven't been cleaned in a long time. And the dinner guests are going, Jesus, what are you doing? You shouldn't be cleaning my house. We're trying to share a meal. And not only are you coming to clean, you're doing the nastiest room you can find and the dirtiest surface you can clean. Jesus, what are you doing? And Peter comes and calls him out on it, and they have a little conversation. And Jesus is like, no, Peter, actually, I need to do this. And then comes the teaching moment. It says, after that, he poured the water into the basin, and he began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with a towel around him. And the teaching moment is getting ready to happen. And it says this in verse 12. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and he returned to his place. And he asked, do you understand what I've done for you? You called me your teacher and you call me your Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and your teacher, have washed your feet, you should also go and wash each other's feet. Jesus said, not only am I going to instruct you on the type of service that my followers will do for one another, I'm going to demonstrate what that looks like. And he says this, I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is the messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. You will be blessed if you do them. He said, I've set an example for you, and you are not above getting your hands dirty, right? And in the context of like a serve day, like literally getting your hands dirty. And so, I think we've spent enough time, not us specifically, but just the American church, has spent enough time being tidy and clean and saying, clean yourself up and come to us when you're ready. But we were sent to go reach lost sheep. And what happens when you spend time with sheep? You start to smell like sheep a little bit, right? And I wonder what could happen if we took on the mindset of, I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty. Both physically, like on Saturday, working on the trail, but even in a metaphorical kind of way, of being willing to go to the unclean places, of being willing to hang out with the unclean people. And that's not a story of go and sin with them. It's not a story of go and compromise, but it's a matter of how you gonna love them if you're never even around them. One of the most convicting moments of my life was the first time I met my neighbor. We were living up in Flagstaff, and we had lived in our house for like 8-9 months. And the neighbor across the street comes out, and we're doing stuff in the front yard, and they introduce themselves to me. And I asked them how long they lived there. Like, oh, we've lived there for 10 years. And they're like, yeah, we noticed you moved in a while ago. We were just waiting for you to come introduce yourself. And in that moment, I just had this conviction in my heart of, how can I love my neighbor if I don't even know my neighbor? And I'm talking about like my literal neighbor that lives across the street. And we're so busy living in our own little bubble of a world that we don't even bother to know that our neighbor exists, let alone love them. So why do we put together serve days? It's so that we have an opportunity where the prep work is done ahead of time for you, and all you got to do is show up and get to know your community and meet a new friend on a mountain bike. And you don't got to get preachy, and you don't got to get with them. You just got to, we're moving rocks, we're cutting branches, we're loving our neighbor, we're getting our hands dirty. I love the story of Jesus washing feet. I really do. I think there's a couple of things we can take away from it. A, Jesus led by example. You know, Jesus never asks us to do anything that he didn't first show us how to do. He didn't ever one time say, do this because I say so. And I think that sometimes our view of God is that he's just this like bitter, angry old man that's just like, don't do that because I will smite you if you do. And it's like, no, don't do that because it's bad for you. And I love you and I want good things for you. And I'll show you by sending Jesus, who did it, as an example for you. Jesus led by example. He continues to always lead by example. I think we pretty clearly demonstrated that no task was beneath Jesus. And I think a lot of times that we look at different situations and we go, I'm not doing that. Jesus scrubbed toe fungus. He wasn't above the dirty task. And so we shouldn't feel too proud or too big or too arrogant to do the dirty work. No task was beneath Jesus. I want to live a life with Jesus as my example, to where no task is beneath me. And so that could be within the church or in the new building. A toilet might need scrubbed. And guess who's not too proud to go scrub a toilet? I'll scrub a toilet all day long. I'm looking forward to having our own toilets that aren't this big to scrub. Right? If you haven't been in the bathrooms, they are designed for children. We got big-sized toilets in the new building. Let's go. We also have cushioned chairs in the new building. No task was beneath Jesus. No task should be beneath us. And here's the real big takeaway this morning, is that when we serve others, we're actually serving the Lord. We see this in Matthew, that Jesus says, when you do this for the least of these, you've done this unto me. And then the righteous will say, Jesus, when did we feed you? When did we give you a cup of water? When did we do these things? And Jesus said, hey, when you did it to the least of these, when you did it to the lowly, you were actually doing it unto me. But I think it's even better illustrated in Colossians. And in this passage in Colossians, I think it's really interesting. This section of Colossians was written specifically where they were giving instructions to households. They said, men, live this way. This is what kind of husband to be. This is what kind of father to be. Women, live this way. This is what kind of wife to be. This is what kind of mother to be. Children, live this way. This is how you should be. And then it gets to this interesting section that is talking specifically to slaves. And again, slavery in that ancient context was different than a modern slavery that we know today. But this was written to slaves. And the reason that I love this passage for the context of what we're talking about today is because if you remember, the very first verse that we read today is that we are instructed to be slaves. The greatest among us will be slaves to everyone. And so slaves, here's your instructions on how to be a good slave. That's weird. Don't take that out of context. Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything, and do it not only when their eye is on you and to curry their favor, but with sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord. Whatever you do, work at it with all of your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is serving the Lord Christ. It is the Lord Christ that you are serving. When we are doing work, when we humble ourselves, when we become servants of all, and we are doing it not for a photo op, I encourage you, show up to the serve day and don't post it on Instagram. We don't do that in our world. You know, the Bible teaches about doing good deeds. It says, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. And I think that so often we only do things so that we can post it online. And we do it like one time, and then we reuse that like section of pictures like throughout the year to make ourselves feel good about the one time we did that one thing. Maybe I'm just preaching to myself. But maybe that's you too. It's like you go on a mission trip, and then you make sure that you get a picture with all the cute little orphan kids, and then you make sure that you post it, and you got to make sure that you got dirt on your face because you're like really working really hard. And then you put it online, and you go, look at what I did for these orphan kids. And you did it one time, and you put it on. And I'm not saying it's bad to do those things, but why? So that we can put it on our social media so we can get a little heart emoji. And we can feel good about it popping up and say, you have 17 hearts on your picture. And for the comments underneath, propping us up, saying, you're doing so good. You should feel really good about yourself for the work and the service you're doing. So what if we served and then we didn't say nothing about it? What if we served without taking pictures? Well, we have to let people know what we did. Why? Why? So that the world knows that the church is doing godly things. They'll know. They'll know. You don't got to tell them. You're just trying to make yourself feel good. And I am so guilty of that. But God says the reward is in the service, because when we do it for our neighbor, we're actually doing it for God, and God is keeping score, and He's going to reward us for it. It talks about for those who pray in public, the reward you're going to get is the applause that you get. And so if you're cool with the only reward you get just being like, hey, you're awesome, way to go, and a heart on Instagram, like, by all means, post it and enjoy your reward. But I want to do it because I want to get that smile from the King of Kings. I want to get that reward that is heavenly. I want to do it because I want to be like God. I want to follow Jesus' example. And we can do it every day of our life. You know, the Bible literally says one of the things in the list of that what we do for the least of these is providing water to someone who asks for a drink. You literally hand a water bottle out your window, and you're serving the Lord. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a desire to become more like Jesus. I have a desire to love like Jesus. And maybe you don't have that desire today. That's totally cool. I just pray that you get to know Jesus. Because I believe once you get to know Him, and I mean like really get to know Him, that He'll start changing your desires for you. So if you don't have those desires, this isn't a guilt trip, beat you up message. This is, hey, get to know Jesus, and He's going to change the way you think, and it's going to be pretty cool. This is going to be pretty fun. And actually, the reward is in the serving itself. And you'll walk away from the service closer to God, more confident in your ministry, and feeling like you actually made a difference. I heard this last week. Get ready to close. A question posed to churches. And it made me stop and think. And I want to ask the question to us this morning. And really think about it. If our church were to close its doors today and shut it down, how long would it take for the community to notice that we're gone? Not the people in the building. Y'all would notice right away. But if we were to close our doors today, how long would it take for the community to notice that we're gone? I want that answer to be fast. I want that answer to be, no, you can't close. We need you. But we're never going to do that if we're so inwardly focused. We're only ever going to have that kind of impact if we put that focus out and we make serving a priority. So I want to invite you. Come be a part of our service. And if you can't make this one, come to the next one. And if you can't come to an organized serve day, find a way to serve your neighbor. And if you don't know your neighbor, go take them a tray of cookies and get to know your neighbor. How can we love our neighbor if we don't know him? And so, man, I'm excited for where we're going. I'm excited for the opportunity that God is giving us to be a light to our community. I believe we're going to have a major impact on our community. And if you'd like to be a part of that, man, we believe there are ways for you to join in. There are ways to partner with us in that. The first way for you to partner with us is through prayer. We need prayer. We need guidance and wisdom. Everything that we do starts with prayer. So if you can't do anything else, just pray for us and pray with us. Second way you can partner with us is by getting involved. Man, as we get into the new building, there's going to be tons of jobs, and we need help. And we need help in kids. I'm going to just keep saying that. We've got like 4 people that rotate in kids. We need more people to help in kids. And so if you are not a kid person, I challenge you, go to Walmart and find someone who's good with kids and invite them to church. Get involved. There's lots of areas for you to help out. We always are looking for more people on the worship team, help with media. We're going to be launching Bible studies, a prayer team, kids' church. Man, if you're bored in church, you're doing it wrong. And so get involved. And the third way is to partner with us financially. We never want to put any kind of pressure on you to give, but if you'd like to give, you can do that in the back of the room. You can give online. Our app is currently down. If you have it already, you can still use it. If you don't have it and you're trying to get it, we're working on it. Apple is a little bit of a headache with their behind-the-scenes stuff, but we'll be launching a new app and a new website in the coming months. And so if you're trying and the stuff seems kind of goofy, just know we're working on that behind the scenes. If you're just visiting or if you're like, that person's crazy, please feel no pressure to give this morning. But if you'd like to partner, if you believe in what we're doing, you have the opportunity to do that. And we believe that God's going to use that money to have a major impact on our community. Will you pray with me this morning? God, we love you. We thank you for what you're doing in our church. We thank you for what you're going to do through our church, what you've already accomplished through it, and for the dreams that lay ahead of us. We look forward to this new season, this new transition, and I can't wait for the people who we're going to meet and have an impact on reaching out on the trails this weekend. Pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Jesus, precious Lord, none on the earth nor heavens above